for all the good that the ACA does do, it does so much more damage. So, everybody keeps talking about, all these people are going to lose their health care, and it expand health insurance by X amount and all this. Let's start dicing into those numbers, because those are just talking points. You can expand healthcare coverage, but the coverage is still far too expensive for the average everyday person to use. Like the expansion of high deductibles and high co-pays is very prohibitive. And then on top of that, now they have to pay a premium for insurance that they can't afford to use or face a penalty. And that's just highly problematic. Then on top of that, you structure it in such a way that your political opposition can undermine it from the jump. And really, like, a lot of its goals that it was even intended to reach, it just never reached. So at this point, I think instead of trying to defend Obamacare, the best thing that people can do, the best thing that the activist community can really do is just keep pushing for single payer. Because that ship is going to sink. It was designed to fail because it was faulty at design. We shouldn't be trying to tie up political capital and trying to defend it.
So let's talk about Obamacare for a second. I mean, what we're doing, right? So as Republicans are getting ready to repeal Obamacare, we have to remember what Obamacare was supposed to be. The ACA, a lot of ways it was sold as a stopgap measure. This is the first step towards single payer, right? And that next step, it was half the loaf, and the rest of the loaf was going to come later. Although, with the supermajority he had in the first 2 years, he could have passed single payer immediately. But again, passing single payer immediately was pitched as, that was a flight of fancy. We can't do that. Only God knows why. A lot of other countries do. Let's assume that's true. We never started transitioning towards single payer. It was faulty from the jump. And now we're talking about the Republicans trying to repeal Obamacare, even as premiums are set to rise, 25% in 2017. And I'm forced to reckon with the fact that, the best defense against Republicans repealing Obamacare was, minimum public option, maximum single payer, because they would have a hell of a chance. They would have a hell of a time repealing single payer healthcare. They would have a hell of a time repealing a public option. Could you imagine? You imagine how much easier it would be to be defending single payer healthcare or a public option right now than it is to try to defend what is essentially mandatory health insurance that is that is rapidly becoming unaffordable.
Well, that's the thing. There was a rally here in Olympia for quote unquote save our healthcare, right? And I heard a lot of people come out, and the ACA, to be fair, has helped a lot of people, but it's not effective. It needs to be replaced with single payer. There has to be a movement to universal healthcare. I've talked to a lot of people. I think a friend in California, her insurance premium is about to be something like $900. I mean, it was flawed from the ground up, and I honestly don't understand why they felt the need to say single payer was just not something we could do at one time. It was that excuse to build something that, it's going to fail. But a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people don't understand that the ACA, for all the good it has done, has caused an incredible amount of harm to a lot of people. Sure, pre-existing condition is no longer in and of itself a death sentence, but that incredibly high premium, that's probably more than some people's rent, very well can be. I mean, what is the point of health insurance if mandatory health insurance if you can't afford the coverage, if you can't afford to have that thing that's going to be able to save your life? I mean, I just don't.
Well, I feel like the resistance to, so when we talk about Obamacare and we see the resistance to single payer, we can talk about the way in which people respond to Obamacare in polls and in statistical data, depending on how you refer to it. So if you refer to it as government issued healthcare, people recoil from that notion. They recoil from the notion of government issued healthcare. But if you refer to it as something else, something more government neutral, public private sector neutral, but that implies the same thing, they are much more amenable to the ACA. Like, so basically, if you say, "Oh, are you in favor of government issued healthcare?" You'd be like, "Nah, I'm not in favor of anything government issued. I'm not in favor of government issued kittens. I'm not in favor of government issued chocolate." Like, people just dislike government issued things. But if you sit down and you describe all of the individual portions of the Affordable Care Act, the good parts, not the mandatory health insurance part, but like the no pre-existing conditions, like the ability to buy into like risk pools, all these other aspects of it, they like that stuff. And so part of the resistance to single payer healthcare is this internalization that the public sector, or rather, what the government should and should not be in the business of doing. This resistance to the notion that the public sector should be providing healthcare to people. This resistance to the notion that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege.
Well,
and this is. Look, go ahead.
A lot of the people that are against it right now are against it because of the name Obamacare. There's, I don't know, that meme that circulated for a while where this guy was so incredibly happy they're going to repeal Obamacare, but then was like, I won't be affected if Obamacare is repealed. My health insurance through the ACA, right? It's become such a partisan issue as opposed to a human rights issue. When you talk to people that are against it, against single payer, they're like, well, if you like that so much, why don't you go to communist Canada? I mean, it's become a bunch of buzzword soup and ridiculous. And frankly, there's a lot of.
I mean, I have to come in and say, like, one of my biggest pet peeves about it is, like, if your biggest thing was that you wanted to keep your children on the insurance or whatever to their 20 whatever, or pre-existing conditions, that's a big one. You could just pass that straight out. You could just pass that separately by itself, and it would just stand. You don't have to enrich insurance companies through that system and then lock the taxpayers into subsidizing prices of insurance on top of that, and have no price controls to control that at all. No price controls, nothing. And that's how you try to expand coverage a little bit, and you didn't even get, maximum coverage. It's like you did. It seemed to me more like the ACA was more to enrich the healthcare industry and the insurance industry than it was really to help people. Like, the helping people was just like a side deal.
So I mean,
that's fair.
This is how we talk about where reality becomes a bit muddy, right? So the reality is that Obamacare, the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, is a give me to the insurance industries, right? Which is dangerous because we know that healthcare is a human right. We know that, right? I think that no one in this panel is going to say healthcare is not a human right, right? We're not going to argue that tonight, right? Healthcare is something that should be provided for if you are, just basic human right. But it has become so indoctrinated and socialized into us that the government should not be in the business of providing these things. That the idea that the private market has their hands in this just makes so much sense. Well, of course it's all being done through insurance industry. Of course, that's what they're there for. And the notion that, well, we can just get rid of the middleman, right? We can get rid of the middleman. The government can provide healthcare itself. They do it in Canada, even though, of course, their drugs are, notoriously ineffective and dangerous. The last time I had some Canadian Tylenol, I spontaneously combusted. And so we've all been there, though. That's why you don't get drugs from the Great North. But so it's this notion, it's this very, very simple neoliberal notion that the government is doing its best when it's doing nothing. Like there is nothing the public sector can do that the private sector can simply not do better. And do you really want the bureaucracy, getting between you and your health and in your doctor? It's like, yes, actually, I would like the government bureaucracy getting between me. If I had to choose between the government bureaucracy and some dude with a stamp at, deciding whether my life is worth $15, yeah, give me a government bureaucracy, because at least I have some say over the guy, and my vote is worth something. But it's ingrained in us that it made so much sense when Obama said, well, we have to take this middle step because the private market has to be involved here somewhere. And it's like, why? Like why?